right, let's dive right in to the world of deep work today.
Sounds good.
You know, it's fascinating stuff, and we're lucky to have Cal Newport's book, also called Deep Work, as our guide for this deep dive.
It's a fantastic resource, really lays out a roadmap for anyone looking to, well, go deep in their work and tap into that kind of next level productivity and creativity.
Exactly. So we'll be unpacking the core concepts for the book, sharing some stories and examples.
And hopefully helping you, the listener, figure out how to cultivate more deep work in your own life, which, let's be honest, can feel like a real uphill battle these days.
Absolutely. So, let's just start with the basics, right? What exactly is deep work? And I love that analogy Newport uses about building your own bowling tower, like Carl Jung's personal retreat for focused thought.
Right. Jung knew that deep work requires a kind of separation from the everyday world, a space where you can shut out distractions and really get into that flow state.
Which I think a lot of us crave, right? That feeling of being totally absorbed in something where time just seems to melt away.
That's the magic of deep work. And Newport argues that it's becoming increasingly valuable in our knowledge economy, where the ability to focus and master complex things is becoming like a superpower.
Yet at the same time, it feels like everything in our modern world is designed to pull us away from deep work, right?
It's true. We're bombarded with distractions, from open offices to constant emails to the never-ending allure of social media.
It's like everyone expects us to be on all the time.
Yeah, always reachable, always responding, always churning out content.
Which is kind of the opposite of what you need to do great work, right? I mean, think about people like David Heinemeier Hansson, the creator of Ruby on Rails, or Nate Silver, the data journalist who predicted the outcome of every election.
They're prime examples of what deep work can achieve, these individuals who've built their careers on the ability to focus intensely and shut out the noise.
And their stories are so inspiring because they show you that deep work is not just about productivity, it's about producing at an elite level.
It's about going beyond just checking things off your to-do list and really creating something meaningful and impactful.
So, okay, I think we all kind of have this intuitive sense of what deep work is, but let's get specific.
All right, so straight from Newport's book, he defines deep work as professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit.
So no more multitasking. No more checking email every 5 minutes.
If you want to truly tap into the power of deep work, you have to eliminate those distractions and really focus on the task at hand.
It's about creating value, right? Honing your skills and doing things that are hard to replicate.
And what's fascinating is that this kind of intense focus actually aligns with how our brains are wired. When we concentrate deeply, we're strengthening neural pathways and making our brains work better.
Like hitting the gym for your mind, building mental muscle.
Exactly. And those mental muscles translate into valuable skills like laser-sharp focus, the ability to process information quickly, and that kind of elite-level output we talked about earlier.
So it's not just good for our work, it's good for us, period.
Absolutely. Deep work is beneficial on multiple levels. But that being said, I think it's also important to acknowledge how hard it can be to actually achieve, especially in today's world.
Yeah, deep work feels almost impossible these days. Why is it becoming so rare?
Well, Newport dives into that, and he points to a few major culprits.
Like what? Hit me with them.
Our work environments are a big one. Open offices, while intended to foster collaboration, often end up being distraction factories.
Yeah, it's hard to get into that deep flow state when you're surrounded by constant chatter and movement.
There's actually a bunch of research showing that open offices actually hinder concentration and productivity.
So it's like trying to write a novel in a coffee shop during peak hours.
Basically, and then there's the always-on culture fueled by constant connectivity and social media.
We're expected to respond instantly to emails, maintain a constant online presence, be available 24/7.
It's exhausting, and it creates this constant low-level anxiety that's the enemy of deep work.
So it's not just about the external distractions. It's about the internal pressure we feel to always be on.
Exactly, and that's something we need to be really mindful of if we want to create space for deep work in our lives.
But okay, let's play devil's advocate here for a second. Why do these trends persist if they're so bad for our productivity? Don't companies realize they're shooting themselves in the foot?
Well, Newport has an interesting theory about this. He calls it the principle of least resistance.
Okay, lay it on me.
Basically, it means that in the absence of clear feedback on what truly moves the needle, people tend to gravitate toward what's easiest in the moment, even if it's not actually productive in the long run.
So answering that email right away feels more productive than ignoring it, even if it means interrupting a deep work session.
Exactly. It creates this illusion of busyness that often masks a lack of real value creation.
And I think we all fall into that trap sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Feeling like we need to constantly be doing something, even if it's not the most important thing.
Oh, absolutely. I know I do. And there's this great example in the book about the Boston Consulting Group. They implemented a policy of predictable time off for their consultants, and everyone thought the clients would be furious.
You'd think so, right, in that kind of high-pressure environment.
But guess what? The clients barely even noticed, and the consultants ended up happier and more productive because they had that dedicated time to recharge and focus.
It's like that saying, work expands to fill the time allotted.
Exactly. And the Boston Consulting Group example really challenges that whole always-on mentality.
It shows that maybe we've bought into this idea that being busy equals being productive, when that's not necessarily true.
And this ties into Newport's critique of social media's impact on content creation, particularly for people like journalists, writers, academics.
You mean the pressure to be constantly active online?
Exactly. It can actually stifle the kind of deep thinking and research that leads to truly groundbreaking work.
It's like, how can you write a well-researched article or compelling book when you're constantly checking Twitter for likes and retweets?
Right? It pulls you out of that deep work mindset and into this shallow world of instant gratification and superficial engagement.
And I think there's a growing awareness of this, right? That social media can be a double-edged sword.
Definitely. And more people are starting to question its role in their lives and looking for ways to create more balance.
Like George Packer, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, he famously avoids Twitter and even resisted getting a smartphone for a long time because he knew how distracting they could be.
And his work is a testament to the power of deep focus. He's able to delve into complex topics and produce incredibly insightful and thought-provoking pieces.
Which brings us to the question, why should we even care about this decline of deep work? Is it really that big of a deal?
I think it is, and not just for the economic reasons we've discussed.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Newport argues that deep work is good for us on a fundamental human level. It impacts our well-being, our sense of purpose, even our ability to find meaning in a world that can often feel pretty chaotic and overwhelming.
Now, this is where I get really intrigued, so tell me more about that.
Well, think about the feeling you get when you're totally absorbed in an activity. Like you lose track of time because you're so engaged.
Yeah, like when you're working on a puzzle or reading a really good book, and you just kind of forget about everything else.
That's what psychologists call a flow state, and research shows it's linked to deep satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment, and even happiness.
So deep work is like a pathway to flow.
Exactly, and flow states are incredibly valuable, not just for the work we produce, but for our overall well-being.
I'm starting to see how this goes way beyond just getting more stuff done.
It's about tapping into something deeper, something more fulfilling and meaningful.
So beyond the flow state, what are some of the other psychological benefits of deep work?
Well, it also acts as a kind of shield against the constant barrage of negativity and distractions in the modern world.
Okay, I can see that. When you're focused deeply, you're less likely to get pulled into all the drama and anxiety-inducing information overload that's everywhere these days.
Exactly. It's like creating a mental fortress of solitude, where you can focus on what truly matters.
And isn't that what we all crave? A sense of peace and clarity in a world that can feel increasingly chaotic.
I think so, and that's part of what makes deep work so appealing. It's not just about being more productive, it's about reclaiming our time and attention and creating space for the things that truly matter to us.
So we've talked about the psychological benefits, the flow state, the mental clarity, but you mentioned something about a deeper philosophical argument for deep work, and now I'm really curious.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, so you were saying that deep work has some deeper, like almost philosophical implications.
Yeah, Newport connects it to this idea of craftsmanship, finding meaning through developing skills and taking pride in creating something truly excellent.
So like not just churning out work, but really putting your heart and soul into it.
Exactly, and he draws on philosophers who argue that our modern world has lost a sense of meaning and sacredness, that we've become too focused on efficiency and productivity at the expense of craftsmanship.
And he sees deep work as a way to reclaim that sense of meaning.
Right. It's about approaching our work with intention, with a focus on quality over quantity, and with a deep respect for the craft itself.
I'm thinking of that quote, "We who cut mere stones must always be envisioning cathedrals."
Ah, yes, that's a great one.
It's about seeing your work as part of something bigger, something truly meaningful.
And deep work helps us do that. It allows us to tap into that deeper level of engagement and create something that we can be truly proud of.
Okay, I'm sold on the idea, but how do we actually incorporate deep work into our lives?
Yeah.
It's not like we can just flip a switch and become masters of concentration.
True. It takes effort and strategy, and Newport outlines 4 deep work philosophies to help us.
Oh, tell me about those.
Okay, so there's the monastic philosophy, the bimodal philosophy, the rhythmic philosophy, and the journalistic philosophy.
Okay, let's break those down, starting with monastic. That sounds pretty hardcore.
Yeah, it's the most extreme of the 4. Think monks in a monastery, completely cut off from the world, dedicating themselves fully to their practice.
So like no email, no social media, no internet.
Ideally, yes. The idea is to eliminate all distractions and create large chunks of uninterrupted time for focused work.
Wow, that takes serious commitment.
It does, and not everyone can pull it off, but there are people who do it successfully, like Donald Knuth, the famous computer scientist, who stopped using email way back in 1990 to focus on his work without interruption.
Talk about going off the grid. I also remember you mentioning Neil Stephenson, the science fiction writer. He actually published a communication policy on his website asking people to respect his need for uninterrupted focus.
Right, he was very clear about his boundaries and his commitment to deep work, and people respected that.
So the monastic philosophy is all about creating that separation, both physically and mentally, from the distractions of the world.
Exactly. It's about creating a space where you can truly disconnect and go deep.
Okay, so what about bimodal? How's that different?
Bimodal is more flexible. It's about alternating between periods of intense, focused work, like the monastic approach, and periods of more typical work with meetings, emails, and all the usual distractions.
So it's like having a deep work mode you can switch on and off.
Yeah, exactly. Think of Carl Jung retreating to his Bowlingen Tower for extended stretches of focused writing and reflection, or Adam Grant, the Wharton professor who schedules blocks of deep work time even during busy semesters.
So even if you can't fully disconnect from the world, you can still find those pockets of time to go deep.
Right, and often the bimodal approach involves those grand gestures we talked about earlier, like J.K. Rowling checking into a luxury hotel to finish writing the final Harry Potter book.
So it's about creating that separation, even if it's temporary.
Exactly, signaling to yourself and others that this is deep work time and it needs to be protected.
Okay, on to rhythmic. This one sounds a bit more, shall we say, manageable for the average person.
It is. It's about building a consistent daily routine that includes dedicated time for deep work.
So like blocking off an hour or two every morning for focused work.
Exactly. The key is establishing a rhythm, a regular time each day for deep work, and sticking to it religiously.
Like Jerry Seinfeld and his don't break the chain method for writing jokes, he wouldn't let a single day pass without writing, even if it was just for a short period.
Perfect example. It's about making deep work a habit, a non-negotiable part of your day.
I like that, making it as automatic as brushing your teeth or having your morning coffee.
Right. The more you can integrate it into your daily routine, the less you have to rely on willpower and motivation.
Okay, last but not least, the journalistic philosophy. This one sounds like it takes a certain kind of personality.
It does. It's about fitting in deep work wherever and whenever you can, much like journalists who often have to write under tight deadlines and snatch moments of focus amidst chaos.
So it's about being opportunistic, finding those pockets of time throughout the day and using them to go deep.
Exactly, and it's not for everyone, but some people thrive on this kind of flexibility.
You mentioned your uncle actually witnessed this firsthand with Walter Isaacson, the biographer, back when they were both young journalists, right?
That's right. Isaacson was amazing. He could just disappear for 20 minutes or an hour, type furiously on his typewriter, and then reemerge fully relaxed and ready to rejoin the group.
So it's about being able to switch gears quickly and find those moments of focus, even in the midst of a hectic schedule.
And Cal Newport himself is a fan of this approach. He manages to be incredibly productive, writing books and academic papers, all while rarely working past 5 or 6 p.m.
Wow, that's impressive. So he's like a master of time management.
He is, and he's shown that it's possible to achieve a lot without sacrificing your personal life or your sanity.
So the key takeaway here is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to deep work.
Right. It's about finding the philosophy that works best for your personality, your work style, and your circumstances.
But the important thing is to be intentional about it, right?
Exactly. To choose a philosophy and then make a conscious effort to implement it in your life.
Okay, so let's say you've chosen your deep work philosophy. What are some practical tips for actually doing the deep work? How do you create the right conditions for those deep dives?
Well, one of the keys is creating rituals to signal to your brain that it's time to focus.
Rituals. Like what kind of ritual?
It could be as simple as designating a specific spot for deep work, listening to certain music, or having a pre-work routine to get yourself in the right headspace.
Like putting on your mental deep work uniform.
Exactly. Anything that helps you transition into that focused mindset.
And we read about Bill Gates and his famous Think Weeks.
Oh, yeah. He would isolate himself in a secluded cabin for a week at a time to read and think deeply about the future of Microsoft.
That's a ritual on a whole other level.
Yeah.
Clearly, he understood the power of creating the right environment for deep work.
He did, and I think there's a lot we can learn from that, even if we can't all afford to disappear into a cabin for a week.
But okay, what about collaboration? Doesn't that kind of contradict the idea of deep work?
That's a great question, and it's something a lot of people struggle with.
Because deep work seems so solitary, right?
It does, but Newport argues that collaboration, when structured correctly, can actually enhance deep work.
Really? How so?
He calls it the hub and spoke model.
Intriguing. Tell me more.
Imagine the hub as the place for interaction, brainstorming, feedback, gathering information. It could be a meeting, a conference, even just a casual conversation.
So the hub is all about sparking ideas and making connections.
Then you have the spoke, where you retreat to process those ideas, dive into research, and do the focused work.
Like the hub is for pollination, and the spoke is where the fruit grows.
Perfect analogy. And Newport gives examples like MIT's Building 20, which was famous for both its serendipitous encounters and its private offices where people could retreat to focus.
And there's Bell Labs, where the invention of the transistor came from a team that had both collaborative hub time and individual spoke time.
Right, so it's about finding the right balance, recognizing that both collaboration and deep work are essential for innovation and creativity.
So it's not an either-or proposition.
Not at all. It's about finding a way to integrate both into your work process.
Okay, so we've talked about philosophies, rituals, collaboration. What about some more tactical advice for actually executing deep work?
Sure, Newport suggests applying principles from the 4 disciplines of execution, or 40X, to our deep work.
40X, huh? Sounds kind of corporate-y.
It does, but it's a really effective framework.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So for individuals, the 2 key disciplines are focus on the wildly important and act on the lead measures.
Okay, break those down for me. How do they apply to deep work specifically?
Focus on the wildly important means identifying a small number of ambitious goals that you want to achieve with your deep work time.
So it's about having a clear target, something that truly motivates you.
Exactly, like that time you set the goal of publishing 5 high-quality academic papers in a year.
Oh yeah, that was ambitious. But it helped me stay focused.
Right, having that specific, challenging goal in mind helped you prioritize your time and energy.
And what about act on the lead measures?
It's about focusing on actions you can take today that will lead to those long-term results.
So instead of obsessing over the number of papers published, you focused on tracking the hours you spent doing deep work.
Exactly, because that's something I could control and measure every single day. It's about focusing on the inputs, the actions you're taking, not just the outputs.
I like that. It shifts the focus from the outcome to the process.
And that can be really empowering because it gives you a sense of control and agency.
So we've laid a solid foundation for incorporating deep work, but let's be honest, the biggest challenge for most of us isn't finding the time. It's resisting the constant pull of shallow work.
You're absolutely right, and that's where Newport's strategies for taming the shallow come in.
Ah, yes. Because we live in a world of distractions. Our phones are buzzing. Our inboxes are overflowing. There's always something vying for our attention.
It's a constant battle, and it can feel overwhelming at times.
So where do we even begin?
Well, the first step is to quantify your shallow work. Track how much time you actually spend on things like email, social media, and mindless web browsing.
You mean actually write it down?
Yes, because most of us drastically underestimate how much time we waste on shallow activities.
It's like that study where people thought they were sleeping 7 hours a night, but when they actually tracked it, it was closer to 6.
We're terrible at gauging our own time use, so shining a light on those shallow habits, seeing how much of our day they actually consume is crucial.
Okay, so once you've quantified it, then what?
Then Newport recommends something he calls a shallow work audit.
A shallow work audit. Sounds intense.
It's about systematically evaluating all your shallow activities and determining which are truly necessary and which can be eliminated or streamlined.
So it's like Marie Kondoing your workday, asking yourself, does this task spark joy?
I love that analogy. But seriously, the shallow work audit involves asking yourself some tough questions like, how long would it take to train someone else to do this task? Or what's the real impact of this task on my most important goals?
It's about challenging assumptions about which tasks are truly important.
Exactly. And often we find that we're spending a lot of time on things that could be delegated, automated, or eliminated altogether.
So it's about being ruthless with our to-do lists.
It is, and it can be liberating to free up that time and energy for deep work.
So the shallow work audit is about identifying and eliminating unnecessary shallow work. But what about the shallow work that we can eliminate?
That's where the concept of draining the shallows comes in. It's about actively reducing your commitment to shallow work.
Okay, how do we actually do that?
It's about setting limits, having honest conversations with your boss or clients, and ruthlessly cutting commitments that don't contribute to your most important goals.
So it's a conscious choice to prioritize depth over shallowness.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that shallow work will always be there, but we don't have to let it consume us.
I like that. Draining the shallows. It's a great way to think about it.
It's about reclaiming your time and attention for the things that truly matter.
So are there any specific strategies for making this happen?
Absolutely. And one of the best is embracing what Newport calls fixed schedule productivity.
Okay, tell me more about that. What does it look like in practice?
It's about setting a firm end time for your workday and then working backward to figure out how to maximize your output within those constraints.
So instead of letting work bleed into evenings and weekends, you set boundaries and force yourself to be more efficient during the day.
Exactly. And Newport himself is a great example of this. He's a professor at Georgetown, and he's known for sticking to a strict 5:30 p.m. end time for work.
And he's incredibly productive with that schedule, so clearly it works.
It does, and it's all about being intentional with your time and making sure that you're using it effectively.
So how do we make fixed schedule productivity actually work for us?
Well, it might sound counterintuitive, but one of the keys is prioritizing downtime.
Downtime. But I thought we were trying to be more productive.
Right, but downtime is essential for deep work. It allows your brain to rest, process information, and come up with creative solutions.
It's like stepping back from a painting to see the whole picture.
Exactly, and there's actually a lot of research to support this. Newport talks about attention restoration theory, which shows that spending time in nature can improve our ability to focus.
So those nature walks aren't just good for our mental health, they actually boost our productivity too.
Precisely, and Newport also suggests what he calls productive meditation.
Productive meditation. Okay, now that sounds interesting. What is it?
It's about using downtime activities like walking, running, or even showering to think deeply about work challenges.
So you're not actively working, but you're still engaging with those important problems in the back of your mind.
Exactly, and this can be incredibly effective because it allows your subconscious mind to work on those problems while your conscious mind is occupied with something else.
It's like giving your brain a chance to chew on those ideas while you're out for a run.
Exactly, and Newport suggests structuring these productive meditation sessions, identify the key variables of the problem you're tackling, and then come up with specific next step questions to focus on.
So it's not just aimless mind wandering. It's giving your brain a framework for deep thinking.
Precisely. And it can turn downtime into a powerful tool for problem solving and idea generation.
I love this idea. Definitely adding productive meditation to my routine.
I think you'll be surprised how effective it can be.
So we've talked about the importance of downtime, but I imagine there are other things we can do to strengthen our focus muscles.
Oh, absolutely. And one of them is to simply embrace boredom.
Wait, boredom. I thought we were trying to avoid boredom at all costs.
Think about it this way. When you allow yourself to be bored, you're training your mind to resist that constant urge to check your phone or seek out distractions.
Because our brains are so addicted to those quick hits of dopamine.
Exactly, and that's why we reach for our phones the second we feel a moment of boredom.
So by embracing boredom, we're breaking that addiction.
In a sense, yes, and it's not easy, but it's essential if we want to develop the ability to focus deeply for extended periods of time.
I remember those long car rides before smartphones when we actually had to entertain ourselves with our own thoughts.
Right, those were the days. But seriously, boredom can be a powerful tool for cultivating focus and creativity.
Okay, so how do we actually embrace boredom? Do we just sit there and stare at the wall?
Not necessarily. One way is to schedule internet blocks, specific times when you allow yourself to go online, and outside those blocks, you resist the urge to connect, even if you're bored.
Like a digital curfew.
Exactly, and it forces you to confront boredom head on and realize that it's not actually that bad.
So it's about reclaiming that lost art of simply being present in the moment without needing constant stimulation.
And the more you practice this, the easier it becomes to resist distractions when you need to focus on deep work.
Okay, we've covered so much ground here, from philosophies to rituals to tactical strategies. But how do we ensure that all this newfound focus actually translates into meaningful deep work?
That's where those wildly important goals we talked about earlier come in.
So it's not just about eliminating distractions. It's about replacing them with something truly meaningful and valuable.
Exactly. It's about being intentional with your time and energy, making conscious choices to direct your focus toward those activities that will have the biggest impact on your life.
It's like clearing the weeds in your garden so the flowers can truly flourish.
I love that analogy. And it's not just about achieving external success, it's about finding fulfillment and satisfaction in the process itself.
And ultimately, isn't that the point? To create a life that's not just busy, but truly lived.
That's the essence of deep work. To create a life where we're not just going through the motions, but truly engaged in what we're doing and making a meaningful contribution.
Wow, this deep dive into deep work has been, honestly, kind of eye-opening.
I agree. It's given us a lot to think about, hasn't it?
It really has. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on how to approach my work.
Yeah.
And maybe even my life in general.
I think that's one of the things I appreciate most about Cal Newport's work. He doesn't just offer productivity tips, he really challenges us to think about what matters most and how we can align our actions with our values.
Exactly. It's about more than just getting things done. It's about creating a life that's both productive and meaningful. And honestly, that's something I've been struggling with lately.
I think a lot of people are, we're constantly bombarded with messages about doing more, achieving more, being more. But it's easy to lose sight of what actually matters in all that noise.
It really is. And this deep dive has been a good reminder to slow down, to be more intentional, and to really focus on the things that bring me joy and fulfillment.
I think that's a great takeaway. And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from the book.
Oh, which one?
Newport writes, "Clarity about what matters provides clarity about what does not."
Ooh, I like that.
It's so simple, but so profound. When we're clear about our values, our goals, our priorities, it becomes much easier to say no to the things that don't align with them.
Which can be really hard, right? Especially in a world where we're constantly pressured to say yes to everything.
It can be, but I think it's essential if we want to create space for deep work and for the things that truly matter to us.
Absolutely. And this brings me to a final thought from Newport's book that I wanted to share with our listeners.
Okay, what is it?
He suggests that instead of getting caught up in the hype surrounding the latest technologies and trends, the newest productivity hack or the hottest social media platform, we should take a step back and ask ourselves a really important question.
I'm listening. What's the question?
Does this tool or this activity truly support my most important goals and values? Or am I just using it because it's there?
Wow, that's a powerful question, and it's so relevant to everything we've been talking about today.
It really is. It challenges us to be more discerning, to think critically about how we're spending our time and energy and to make sure that our actions are aligned with what we truly believe in.
It's about choosing quality over quantity, about being intentional, and about creating a life that reflects our values, not just the values of the culture around us.
Exactly. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. This deep dive has given us so much to think about, and I hope it inspires our listeners to explore the world of deep work and see how they can incorporate it into their own lives.
I couldn't agree more. It's been a pleasure diving deep with you.
Likewise, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of deep work. Until next time, stay curious, stay focused, and stay deep.